Hey everybody, I'm Miss Susan and this is Let's Sew, and today we're going to be making our very first project. We are going to be making a hot cold pack. The project is very easy to do. What you do with this, it's filled with rice, and if you need a hot pad you put it in the microwave. If you need it cold, put it in the freezer, and you've always got something ready to go in case you get injured or something like that. Okay, so here are the supplies. You are going to need a 9-inch square of fabric. You want quilting cotton, you want 100% cotton fabric. Remember, we're going to be putting this into the microwave, and a synthetic like polyester nylon, don't know what's going to happen when you put it in there, and you don't want a hot cold mess. So you want 100% cotton quilting fabric. If you request that in the fabric store, they will know what you're looking for. Also, 9 inches, they will cut it for you for 1/4 yard. You can get 4 hot packs out of that 1/4 yard. So that's, if you're making gifts or something, that's a great thing to know. Next, you're going to have sewing thread. Normally, when you do a project, you want to use thread that's going to match what you're doing. In this case, of course, when I'm showing you on the sewing machine, I want you to see it, so I'm using a darker thread. But it doesn't really matter what color thread you have for this. It's your first project. You want to be able to see your stitches. And so I recommend just whatever color you have, go ahead and use it. Next, we need a seam gauge. We're going to do a little bit of measuring. We'll be using the slide to set our distances, our measurements. So we'll need that. We will need a fabric marking pen. You're going to need 1.5 cups of uncooked white rice. Don't need anything expensive, just inexpensive white rice. You also need a funnel. If you have a funnel at home, use that. We're going to use it to get the rice into the bag. If you don't have a funnel, just roll up, this is rolled up piece of paper, and that'll work just fine. Okay, I want to start first with showing you the right and wrong side of the fabric. This is a little different piece that what we're going to use in my project that I'm going to show, but it shows this better. The right side of the fabric is the side that you can see the pattern really clearly on. The wrong side, see how light that is? You can see that there's a pattern there, but it's not very strong. So this is going to be your right side, and this is what you have for your wrong side. So when I refer to those, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I'll move these things out of the way. Here's the piece I'm going to be working on. What I would like for you to do, we're going to fold it down, and I've kind of pre-folded this for the magic of camera, but I'm going to set my seam gauge at 1/2 inch, and I'm going to put it on. Going to be measuring it all the way down, and as I go along, oh yeah, we also need pins, so don't forget those. I'm going to pin it just to hold it. As I measure, I'm going to fold it down just to pin it to hold it. We'll take it over to the iron. Now, the pins that I'm using have plastic heads. Don't get your iron against those heads, they might melt. But if you just keep the tip of your iron along the edge of your fold, it'll work just fine. Then remove those pins. Now, you're going to take your fabric. See how I've got the 1/2 inch folded to the wrong side. Now, we want the seam on the inside. We want the ugly raw edge on the inside. So what we're going to do is fold our piece in half. So the fold is on one end. Get your pins. And you're going to pin starting with we'll show this close up in just a second. From that top fold all the way down the long side. And then we're going to turn it. And we're also going to pin on the bottom. So this is what we have here is what we're going to use when we get ready to sew. So I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see it a little bit better and show you where you're actually going to stitch. So here's our fabric pinned and ready to sew. I put a piece of paper behind it so you can see those pins in there a little bit better, but I've pinned it down the long side and across the other folded side, and that's the direction that you are going to sew. So you're going to start here. Let's move that into camper range. We're going to start here, stitch down here, we're going to turn and pivot and come across here. And that's why it's really easy. That's the only sewing, that and closing up are all we have to do. So let's head to the sewing machine and get started on our project. Before we start sewing, we need to know what stitch we're going to use. So when I turn my machine on, this is going to be pretty easy to set up because I just turn the machine on. It defaults to stitch number 1, which is a straight stitch. The length of the stitch is in millimeters. Length and width is in millimeters. So 2.5 is the length of my stitch. It's a straight stitch, so it has no width. Sometimes on a sewing machine, when you turn it on, your needle might be in the center position. On this particular machine, it's on the left-hand side. You're talking very little amount of space, but that's what we are going to be working with. So we're at the sewing machine, and we are going to be using the edge of the presser foot as our guide as we sew. It's about 3/8 to 1/2 inch from the needle to the edge of the foot, and that's fine for this project. Also, what I put on the side here is called washi tape. Washi tape is found in the craft section, paper craft section. It's used for scrapbooking and things like that, but it makes a nice guide. So when you put your piece underneath, you can follow along all the way down your piece to make sure you have it straight. One tip I want to give you is instead of watching your needle all the time, watch your guide. If your fabric is along the guides that you have set up, then it is going to automatically be straight. So keep that in mind. This is kind of what washi tape looks like. If you don't have washi tape, painter's tape works just fine. So we are going to start with the this is the folded edge. This is what we folded with the iron. And remember to take your pins out. So take that first pin out, and we're going to start a few, just so straight, a few stitches. Now remember I talked about sewing in reverse on one of the Get to Know Your Machine segment. And I'm going to push that button or push your lever if that's what your machine, how your machine is made. I want to go backwards. Then I'm going to come forward again. And the reason for that is that gives me a nice secure edge, because remember we're going to turn this right side out and we're going to be filling it with rice. So we want a nice secure edge on there. So we're going to start sewing. Take your pin out. That one I went a little too far. Take that out. See how I'm watching that my fabric is on the edge of my foot or on the edge or on the edge of the washi tape. Let's get that one out. As we come down to the corner, we're going to turn and pivot the fabric, because we need to go the other way. And the way we do that is we're going to turn our hand wheel. That's why it's going so slow. I'm turning the hand wheel, set my needle down in the fabric. Then I can pick up my presser foot and turn it. And the needle holds onto the fabric so it doesn't shift around. Take out that pin. And if you don't get that pivot right exactly on the spot, doesn't matter with this particular project. We're going to sew to the end. This is that folded edge. You want to go into reverse. If I reverse 4 or 5 stitches. lift your needle all the way to the top. If you don't, if your needle's here or here, when you try to take it out, lift your presser foot, see how that's caught? You want your needle to be all the way up as far as it can go. That releases your thread. And I'm going to clip my excess thread. Now I've left a tail of about 5 inches. You don't want to clip your thread here because once that thread takes up, watch this, I made a little loop out of it. See how that straightens out? It's pulling that thread up, which is what it's designed to do. If you cut this too short, it's going to unthread your needle, and you don't want that to happen. So leave yourself a nice long tail. 5 or 6 inches is fine. And so now our next step, here's our completed sewing. Our next step is we're going to go back to the work table for a second, and we're going to turn this right side out and get ready to fill it with rice and sew it closed. Okay, we are back at our work table. We're going to take our hot cold pad cover and turn it right side out. Just kind of push those corners out with your fingers. There we go, and we're just going to give it a quick finger press. That's really all it needs. Now, because we want our piece to be flat, we are going to be marking our stitching line that we're going to use to stitch it close. So get your seam gauge, and we're going to set it for 1/4 of an inch. And I've got my marking pen, and along that folded edge, you're going to mark your stitch line. Now this marker will come out later. This just happens to be a much darker fabric marker than I typically use, but I want you to be able to see it. So here I've got my marks on there, and at this point we're going to fill it with rice. You only need to fill it about 3/4 full. You don't want to fill too much. You need to have room to sew it closed, and you want the hot cold pack to be able to wrap around whatever you're using it for. So only about 3/4 full. By the way, this using this 9-inch square, what I used was the 1.5 cups of rice, like I explained earlier, but you can make these really any size, and you'd want, if it's bigger, you want to add a little more rice. If it's smaller, a little less rice. But this is the 1.5 cups is what I used for the 9-inch square. And we're going to get our funnel. And we're going to fill that up. I'm not going to fill it completely right now, but once you have all your rice in there, you're going to get your pins, and we have to pin this closed. Get this pin set. Okay, so here we go. It's pinned closed and ready to go back to the sewing machine, so let's get it sewn closed. So here I have my hot cold pack ready to sew. You can see the mark that I made. This is going to be my stitch line. And I'm lining that line up with where my needle is. Now, with the weight of the rice, it wants to hang off the side, so make it a little bit easier. Just find a thick book, a box, or something like that. Put it next to your sewing machine so you have that extra weight kind of supported. Makes it a little bit easier to work. And I'm going to start sewing. Back stitch. Don't forget the back stitch. Just 4 or 5 stitches is fine. And I'm sewing right on my line. That line is now my guide. And that line will come out later. Yep. Get that pin out of there. We'll get that one out of there. that one out of there. I am sewing right on my line. When I come to, yeah, my box is going with me, which is really okay. Get to the end, let's backstitch. Raise your presser, your hand wheel, get the needle all the way up. Clip your threads. And you're done. Here is your finished hot cold pack. So these hot cold packs make great gifts for friends, for family, for your teachers. Use your recipient's favorite color, your favorite design, your favorite sports team, your favorite superhero, or whatever. Store in the freezer. I like to put them in a Ziploc bag just so they don't get all wet. Store in the freezer if you need a cold pack. For a hot pack, I would put them in the microwave for about 30 seconds, see if it's warm enough, another 30 seconds. You don't want it to get too hot. Here's just a couple of samples that I made. This was the fabric that I used to show. This one's kind of fun for little kids. It's got little bugs on it, little insects. And who wouldn't feel better with one like this? Lemons, limes, oranges. It's a bright, bright color. I know I'd feel better if I used it. So congratulations on your first sewing project. You did a great job, and I'm so glad you joined me on to get ready, to get set, and let's sew.